Hey guys. So Monday, April 13th. This week we are reading How Fourth Wave Feminism is Changing Disney's Princesses. So you'll notice we've kind of gone through all these different themes, right? We talked about sexuality, we talked about race, now we talked about body image, now we're talking about gender in Disney movies. And this is something that I especially saw like a lot of you guys talking about 2 weeks ago when we talked about the gender transgression article. A lot of people mentioned like the Powerpuff Girls as a show that uses strong female leads who don't necessarily live up to your normal stereotypes of femininity. So there's I guess just a few things I want to address today. So we're going to talk about the reading a little bit, and we're also going to talk about the essay a little bit. So I want to start by talking about the essay. So as per the current assignment sheet, it's due Wednesday, April 22nd. I think I'm going to push that back to at least April 25th. So that you guys will have a little more time, and because I am just getting rid of the final project, there's no way you can do a photo essay from being in your house that's good, at least. And I mean, I feel like, or maybe you could, but it's obviously your options are so limited by the current situation in the world that a photo essay is not the assignment to do right now. So we're just gonna have two major assignments for the semester, which is how 1158 usually works anyway. And I will distribute the grade for the photo essay over your attendance and participation, and probably your letter of reflection too, because everyone usually does well on that. So some things I want to point out for this essay. You need an academic source. An academic source is one that you find through the library databases that is peer-reviewed. You have to check off the peer-reviewed box in the bottom left-hand corner in order to make sure your sources are peer-reviewed. We went over this in class, but if you need help, you can chat with a librarian via the library site. There's lots of resources there. And we had the library quiz and everything too, so I think you guys should have all taken that tutorial. If you didn't, please do, because otherwise you're not going to know how to do how to find an academic source. And obviously I can't, I don't have the resources here to put it on a screen and show you or anything. So yeah, the tutorial is your best bet. So in terms of academic sources, as we know, they are published in journals, they are peer-reviewed by experts in the field, and most importantly, most of them are not going to be about one single show or movie. So everything that we've read that was an academic source, Children of Color and the Disney Fairy Tale Princess, Gender Transgression and Villainy, those are both academic sources. They talked about a lot of different things. And so you might not find an academic source that's about the exact thing you want to write about. That's okay. I don't want to just read your summary and paraphrase of the exact something someone else has already said, right? This is a research essay, but it's also a critical analysis essay, which means your thoughts are really important here. So one of the main reasons I gave you that Steven Universe essay as a sample is because that author took an academic source that was about masculinity in animated films generally, and they then applied that framework to a different show. So if you want to write about, I don't know, gender roles in Frozen. Honestly, you probably can find sources about Frozen, but if you want to write about gender roles in Frozen, you could use an article that was written about Disney princesses before Frozen came out. And you can use that article to show how Frozen has changed Disney princesses, right? The paradigm has shifted. If you wanted to write about, I don't know, maybe race and the Princess and the Frog, there are a lot of sources about that too, but I would say using Children of Color and the Disney Fairy Tale Princess could totally work for that, right? you do have to find an academic source outside of the one that I gave you, but just because that article doesn't talk explicitly about the Princess and the Frog doesn't mean you can't take those ideas and apply them to the Princess and the Frog. So I hope that makes sense. The other thing I want to clarify is that you're not just writing about a show, like, generally. It's not a review. I saw a lot of problems with this, with the music essays, that you guys were just, like, telling me how good a song was. I don't care. Like, for this assignment, I don't want to know how good something is. I want to know what it is saying on a specific theme and what evidence you see within the show to support that. So the Steven Universe essay very clearly tells me what Steven Universe is doing when it comes to its portrayal of masculinity. Like, that is a well-focused essay. So you wouldn't want to just be writing about, like, race and gender and sexuality in a show. You have to, like, pick one thing, right? So I gave you a bunch of examples of possible themes that you might write about, and those include, but are not limited to, femininity, masculinity, family, death, love, race, ethnicity, bravery, good versus evil. So those are on the assignment sheet. Those are just some things that I think you could write about, but it's not limited to that either. Okay, you need a thesis statement. A lot of problems with thesis statements in the music essays. I know we went over that in class, so I'm a little, and I also know you all took 1157, so I'm a little confused as to, like, why there's so much difficulty formulating an argumentative thesis. But if you can't take the last two sentences of your introduction and show me what the essay is going to tell me from those sentences, you don't have a thesis. So those two sentences have to say, like, what you will tell me in the essay, what the essay will be about. You don't want the reader to be kept guessing in an analysis like this. Okay. I'm also pushing the peer review back to Monday. I'll give you guys your partners tomorrow, probably. And I haven't heard from anyone about writing a fairy tale, so I guess no one is planning to do that, which is fine. So yeah, I hope that's reasonably clear. Just really make sure you have a thesis statement, that you're engaging with sources but not just stealing their ideas, and that you have a clear focus outside of just, like, I'm writing about Cinderella, right? You need something about Cinderella. Okay. So let's turn to this reading a little bit. I think it's a pretty self-explanatory reading, and I think the discussion questions should be pretty useful to help you guys, like, get involved in it. But I guess I just do want to make sure that you all understand what we mean when we say waves of feminism. So there is debate over, like, when the third wave ended and when the fourth wave began, and if we're still just in the third wave, like, whatever. There's a lot of debate about these things. But the first wave was definitely when women got the vote. So it was kind of limited. It was a little more, like, geared toward wealthy white women who wanted to be able to have the same, like, political privileges as men. But it's still, like, often these activists still portrayed women as the weaker sex, or, somehow inferior to men. This article doesn't actually clarify that a lot of these activists did that as a sort of persuasive technique to convince men to let them have the vote, and to let them do what they want, like saying, oh yes, you are superior, but can we please still do this, right? But it was somewhat limited, right, as any movement for civil rights is. Like, it takes time for any group of people to be, like, fully liberated. And I don't know that we've ever seen that truly happen, actually. So, yeah. So when you think about these movies, Snow White, Cinderella, and Sleeping Beauty, they're all very much focused on how beautiful the woman is. And she doesn't have much of a personality outside of that. and when they meet their Prince Charmings, they catch him by being beautiful and not by being interesting. And I mean, it's kind of wild because like Snow White came out in like the 30s, and we haven't shifted away from like beauty as the way to get a man as much as I think one might hope that we had. So that's, you know, kind of interesting. Their personalities, as this author states, are always kind and gentle and pleasant. They're friends with woodland creatures and fairies. They're obedient and submissive to their superiors, although it is interesting to note that their superiors are usually also women. They're just women who are bad at being feminine. So that can kind of take you back to gender transgression and villainy. So in these early movies, we see these more masculine, more demanding women portrayed as the villain. And so what that kind of says is like, women who know what they want and do whatever they can to get it are evil, right? So, all right. And then, the second wave of feminism was a little bit more about women like in the workplace, and it was about women should be treated equally, we should get equal pay, we should be able to do any kind of a job that a man does, and if women want to work, they should be allowed to work. We shouldn't be tied to just being mothers and caretakers. Like, we should be able to be in the business world the same way men are. So that was like lasted till the 80s and didn't really have any Disney movies associated with it, but did give us a lot of the things that are still part of feminism today, like having control over your own career, reproductive autonomy, stuff like that. And then, in the 90s, we see the third wave begin, which I think one could say isn't that different from the fourth wave. But the third wave started to include women who weren't just white and weren't just straight, and weren't just wealthy. So encouraged every woman to define femininity, beauty, and sexual orientation for herself apart from the expectations of the patriarchy. And so when you look at the 90s princesses, although they still are part of these happily ever after narratives where the man comes to save them, they also like are more assertive. They know what they want. So Mulan, I think, is probably like, I think she's like the most radical of these princesses. She dresses like a man and joins the army in order to keep her father from having to enlist, and helps defeat the Huns, and also falls in love with the dude in the army once he figures out that she's a woman. First he's mad at her, but then they fall in love. And they fall in love not because she is so beautiful, but because she has like a really good plan to defeat the Huns. And so Pocahontas, similarly, she like wants to be with John Smith and decides to defy her father, who has arranged a marriage to Cocoam for her that she doesn't want to be in. The Little Mermaid, she also defies her father and decides that she wants to go live on land with Eric. So all of these princesses are like, they're more independent. They speak their minds a little more, although Ariel does like lose her voice in order to, and makes Eric love her without her voice. So there are still some issues with these princesses, but it's a big step forward from Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, and Snow White, who had no control over their destinies and instead did things like wish upon a star and then wait for a prince to come save them. So these 90s princesses control their destinies a little more. And then finally it talks about like today and the current wave of feminism, which they don't go into as deeply as I would hope, although I would say fourth wave feminism is, to me, an extension of the third wave. But again, it's the term that everybody, feminism is hard to define, right? Like, everybody has a different sort of take on it. At its most basic, feminism just means you believe in the equality of all genders. But in reality, there is a lot of debate about what is good feminism today. So this author says, in fourth wave feminism, women who were raised in a supposedly post-feminist culture, a culture that claimed to have reached social equality of the sexes, have come to recognize that the world is still not safe or fair for all women. Discussions about workplace discrimination, sexual assault, street harassment, and body and slut shaming crop up on forums all over the internet. While the third wave, eschewing concrete constructs and categorization, often resisted the feminist label, these new feminists have reclaimed the term. So I guess fourth wave feminism is very internet-based, which is good, right? Because the internet gives women and just people generally like access to information that they wouldn't have had beforehand. So a lot more people are able to take part in these like critical discussions of social movements than we're able to do before. And the fourth wave is also saying like, we're not there yet. And I think that's really important to know about it, right? So things like the Me Too movement, like, so like, even if our society looks like it's equal, like it's pretty telling how many women in Hollywood had to basically experience sexual assault in order to have careers. And that's a very privileged class of women. Like, that happens to women all over lots of different industries, right? To various degrees. And that's just one example. So fourth wave feminism is like what we're in now. This kind of movement for broader gender equality. And I think fourth wave feminism also has to do with like gender expression, right? Like, fourth wave feminists, I think, are a lot more concerned with like masculinity and the way in which young boys are socialized not to be emotional. So in much the way that like third wave feminism was working to empower women to be like more masculine, right? Like they could be the heroes in a story, they could be the Powerpuff Girls, right? I think fourth wave feminism is also about like showing how boys can be sensitive and vulnerable in ways that they have not been allowed to be because of these rigid gender roles for both men and women. So those are, I guess, some aspects of fourth wave feminism, and some movies that correspond to it that this author talks about are Frozen and Brave. And what she says are the main like defining features of these movies are that the princesses like don't have these happily ever stories at the end. So Disney princess movies have up until now always been about the ultimate happily ever after. Like you can do whatever you want, but you're not, you haven't achieved your potential as a princess until you found a man to settle down with. And in these stories, Merida and Elsa can kind of do other things. They have other dreams, they have other problems, they have other stuff that they're working out that doesn't necessarily have to do with like getting married to a man. And so I think that there are also like movies that have come out since then that really so there are other movies that have come out since that exemplify the fourth wave of feminism too. Sorry, I started reading the comments of this article. And so this is another example of like you might be interested in taking some of the ideas that you see in this piece and applying them to Frozen 2, for example, or maybe a movie that's not a Disney movie at all, or a movie that's not discussed here. Like I think some of these ideas can apply to The Princess and the Frog too, which is like an interesting in-between kind of movie where like she does have this happily ever after at the end, but she also has like these career dreams and aspirations that are more important to her than falling in love with a prince. She kind of falls in love grudgingly. Okay, so I hope that that kind of gives you some stuff to think about, and I'm looking forward to seeing like what you have to say about this piece. I will join the discussion when you guys have all posted, and just please email me if you have questions about the essay, and I will talk to you soon. I hope you're all staying safe.